If it was up to me, entirely up to me, this session, I would have offered this session at the very, very beginning because I think it's fundamental to everything else.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We should study our client, and this session is designed to provide an overview of systematic approach for doing so. Jamak, welcome and thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. As I do with every other session, please remember these are not meant to be comprehensive sessions on how to do your online marketing. They are supposed to provide a guideline, a strategic way of looking at what your online marketing should be so you don't get caught into traps and you can hire somebody and they can help you, or do your own research and get there. This session in particular is one of my favorite, if not the favorite. If it was up to me, entirely up to me, this session, I would have offered this session at the very, very beginning because I think it's fundamental to everything else. You may wonder why I didn't, because this was my design. Nobody forced me to do this. And the reason for that is if I started with this, nobody would be interested in taking this program. If I started with SEO as I did, everybody would want to be in. If I started with social media marketing, everybody would want to know about it. The reason is those are buzzwords right now. Everybody is interested in doing Facebook marketing, Facebook advertising, Instagram this, Instagram that, SEO, link building, all this stuff that are like buzzwords and are all over the place. These are what people respond to. And knowing my marketing, that's what I started with. Because if I had started with something else, said, here, come, let's get together and understand the psychology of the buyer, people would probably be like, no, that's boring. I don't need to do that. Let's do something flashy first, right? So that's the reason I didn't offer it. But for the people who are on this call right now, you are the people who have lasted this long. So you deserve to know this. This is fundamental. This is the thing that makes all the difference. When you see people doing all the right things, but it's still not working out, is because they've missed this one step. And this is a critical step. It's something that is a continuous um, nourishing process of the client avatar. I don't know who coined it this. The first time I heard it was something about, I think, 15 years ago, I want to say, from a gentleman by the name of Evan Pagan, who is one of the, I mean, greatest marketers in my mind, at least. He's really, really good at what he does. He sells educational marketing material, which is what I got into. And, this is kind of, that's why he was one of the people that I studied. But when you want to decide, and this is interesting for me as I was thinking about this during the week, I thought, isn't it interesting that I'm teaching this to Toastmasters? Because even when you're putting together a speech, this is important. If you think about it, if you've ever gotten in front of a bunch of people and you said some stuff to them and their eyes glazed over and they look like they don't know what you're talking about, they're not even there, you probably got it wrong in terms of who this audience is. And yes, personas is the same thing as client avatars. There are people call them different things. The challenge is, superficially, this is very easy to figure out. Okay, so let's define it and let's get into it a little bit. I'm gonna try and maybe we'll do some work together this session, depending on how things go. But the concept is the sort of overall concept, the overarching concept, if you will, is who am I talking to, right? Who am I selling to? Depending on what industry you're in, what you're doing, even in terms of Toastmasters, depending on what club you're in, every club has its own sort of fabric. Every time I teach VPPRs, I tell them, what is the unique selling proposition of your club? What is the thing that stands out about your particular club? You need to sit down with the club executive and figure out what that is. if not with everybody else in the club, right? We all together as a community, we form this thing that's called the club. The club is nothing more than a bunch of members getting together. So depending on who those members are and what sort of the direction of that club is, we bring something different to the table. And that defines many times who our client avatar is. You translate that into business, you're offering you if you come from a good place, a good heart, the product that you offer people is always very good. You're not trying to scam people. So in your mind, if I asked you what is your product, who's your product for, many cases, small business owners especially say everybody, everyone under the sun. Okay. The issue is we almost never have the budget to market to everybody, right? Even if you do, it's more effective to focus on a laser focus on a group of people rather than take a shotgun approach to everybody. And then maybe you can expand that group by going into different niches and work on those guys, right? So the client avatar is the study of who your audience is. But here's the difference between what the general perception is versus what a good marketer's perception is, or a mature marketer, I should say. The general perception is let's figure out what the demographic of the people are, right? Male or female, what age group, what's their education level, general things like that. Whereas an expert marketer, when we're talking about client avatar, we're talking about very, very specific things. So the concept of a client avatar is that you're creating a person, you're creating a persona, you're creating an avatar. This avatar, you're going to name it, right? So this is a person, this is an actual real person that you can possibly visualize, right? So you give them a name, you know what age they are. This is not a superficial person. It is a real person, like you know what I mean, real imaginary, if you will. Have you ever had an imaginary friend or knew somebody who had an imaginary friend in their childhood? Kind of like that. It's that real, right? Yeah. So you can see this person, and you'll understand why this is critical as I tell you more about it. So if you think about a bunch of circles, each one of your clients being one of those circles intersect at certain places. This avatar sits at the place where all of them intersect. Okay, so if we drew a circle for all of your clients and they cross each other, right? That point where all of them cross each other, those are the habits, the definition that fits your client avatar. Now you might think, okay, that's very, very small. That could be if you think about the word personality is the wrong word, but for the lack of a better word in my mind, I can't think of the right word. Let's think personality. You might say that that's probably 10% of the personality of my customer. That's okay. That's exactly what you want to market to, because when you market to that, when you build your avatar based on that, for the most part, what you're doing is your message is cohesive to everybody that's in your audience. Okay, so it makes sense to everybody because they all have that 10%. Does that make sense? The 80%, the 90% for each person might be, for one person might be 60%, for one person might be 80%. That doesn't apply to them. We don't want to focus on those things because then we alienate a bunch of people who are still in our audience. Whereas if we focus on where they intersect, um, we are making sense to them. We are coherent to them, right? So that's what we're focusing on. But the question, the big $1 million question is, how do we do that? How do we go about doing that? Ray, somebody is unmuted. How do we go about doing that? What is the methodology that we can use in order to get there and in order to achieve that? Okay, so we need to start with, and there's definitely, if you guys go look on the internet for this type of concept, you'll find a lot. You'll find a lot of different approaches to doing this. What I am working on with you today is one approach. It's the approach that works for me, that has worked for me, and I always do this. So let's start here. When you start a project, I want you to start with this. If you haven't started the project, if you have started today, right? So you start with a document that basically says client avatar, customer persona, whatever you want to call it, right? This is the document that is going to be the definition of who this person is. If you were going to write almost a biography, if you will, for one person, this is what this looks like. And we're going to go about the sort of a strategic suggestion that I have of how to go about creating this, but you'll develop your own. But this is the key thing. This document continuously develops. It is a dynamic document. So every single time you have a sales call, every single time you speak to a prospect, every single time you have a guest at a Toastmasters club that comes into your Toastmasters club, if you're a VPM, for example, every time you have that conversation with your client, with your potential client, you continue to develop this, right? So you come back to this document and you keep adding to it. You discover new things and you keep adding to it. So how do we go about doing this? First, you do the stuff that's obvious, right? The age, how old is this person? Are they male or female or other, right? So you write all of that out. And then you come into the stuff that they're dealing with. So what I suggest you do, what I always do, is I start with what are they seeing, what are they looking at, and this is a tricky question. What you want to do is you want to put yourself in the position of the person that you're trying to write about. When they wake up in the morning, what do they see? What's around them? When they get up and go to work, what are they seeing? So you're kind of writing a story. You're kind of writing the details of who this person is. Once you're done with what they're seeing around them, you look at what they're hearing. What are they listening to? Let me give you some examples. Is this a person that wakes up in the morning, turns to their right, reaches for their phone, the first thing they do, grabs their phone, and looks at their notifications? What are their notifications? Are they text messages from their friends? Is it news? Is it social media? If it is news, what kind of news alerts are they getting? Because our news alerts are customized, right? That's telling you what they're interested in. Are they looking at political news? Are they looking at market news? What is it? What is it? What is that news alert that just popped up that's on their phone that they're responding to? What's the next thing they do? Do they sit at the edge of their bed and read a book? Do they say a few prayers before they get up? Do they go sit down and meditate? Do they exercise? Right? So what they're seeing, that's what that means, right? What are they looking at? What is their and then you continue this throughout the day, right? So that section becomes, what are they looking at? What are they saying? Think of it as eyes, right? Then the next thing we do is we go to their ears. What are they listening to? If you notice, what we're doing is we're looking at their input, right? What are they taking into their brain? So what are they listening to? It's the same thing. Is someone laying beside them that turns around and says, "Good morning, honey, I love you"? Or do they open their eyes into a fight, for example, with the person who is laying beside them? Or are they alone and they get up and they turn on the news? Or do they listen to a podcast? Or do they wake up to screaming kids? Which one is it? And then as they continue to go on throughout the day, you can see how you can do this, right? They go get into their car, what are they listening to? They go to work, what are they listening to? A special place that you'll come to with both of these is you'll discover who's around them, right? So who are they listening to? Who are they seeing around them? when you're looking at who are they listening to, you have to pay attention to the difference between hearing and listening. Because the person I listen to potentially has influence on me. And that influence is important because influence causes me to make different decisions when it comes to my life. So you looked at what they're looking at, and I'm trying to summarize this, you guys. Like obviously you can see how much depth we can go into with these, right? This can on its own can be a 10-session workshop, right? It's deep. So when you're paying attention to what they're seeing and what they're listening to, if there's a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being very, very superficial and 10 being deep, you the deeper you go, the better you will uncover who this person is. The challenge you'll face, and I'll tell you this because I've done this many, many times for clients and projects that I've worked on myself, is that you'll get to places where you go, well, I don't know. I have no idea. How do I know this? Right? You need to guess at that point in time, right? You need to guess. And then what you do is throughout your messaging, it's like marketing is always experimentation. There's no guarantee for anything. But as you're marketing, as you're putting your content out there, the response that people give you, they'll tell you whether your guess was right or wrong. And if your guess was wrong, you correct it and then you experiment again. That's what A/B testing is. A/B testing at its best is based on some sort of an information. So you got to have that information and then you test it. It's like having a thesis. You test it. You're having a hypothesis. You test it. If it's wrong, you have a new hypothesis and you keep testing until you get at the truth, right? So slowly this gets more and more accurate as you go through. But once you go beyond that sort of level 10 of each one of these, you get to a point where these things transition into our own or the person's own individual psychology. It gets to what goes on in their head, right? Same thing with eyes and ears again. What are they seeing? What are they visualizing? In their own sort of the eye of the mind, what are they seeing now? What is it as they go throughout the day? What are they visualizing? What are the images that they're creating for themselves? If you pay attention to yourself throughout the day, you'll see that you do this often. There are images that you have, and especially if you engage in any sort of activity where you actually close your eyes, giving an opportunity to that sort of internal eye to be more evident, such as when you're trying to go to sleep, for example, or when you're meditating, if you do that, then you start to really see what images are running through your head, right? So this is the area you want to focus on. And then the listening part of it is a lot more involved and easier because you never close your ears, right? But we always have thoughts. We're always hearing ourselves in there doing stuff. That's happening to you guys right now as you're listening to me. And if you go with that voice a little bit further, you stop to hear me, right? All of a sudden you come back and you go, whoa, 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 wait a minute. What was he, what happened here? I don't know how he got here, right? That's when you're lost in thought. And it happens all the time, right? As speakers, we know that because when we look at people, we can tell by their eyes most of the time that they're no longer paying attention to us, right? It's the thoughts, it's what they're listening to internally, but their eyes tell us that they're no longer paying attention to us. So we're used to that, right? We have an advantage of being public speakers. We're kind of used to that kind of um, that knowledge that people have that internal voice. Everybody does, right? So basically, you're getting to a place where you're studying what this client avatar is thinking, right? Which is deep, which at the surface, if I didn't take you through this step by step of going through it, if somebody came to you and said, You need to know what your client thinking is thinking. You go, you're crazy. Well, I don't even know what I'm thinking. How am I supposed to tell what they're thinking, right? But you do. You can come to those conclusions. And naturally, what comes after thought? Emotions, right? What kind of emotions do they have? Are they angry? Are they sad? Are they fearful? What do they get angry about? What is their biggest fear? Now you're getting into good stuff, right? We did all of that work because this is where it matters. The emotions. Any type of statistically proven, any type of buying that we do is emotion based. Somebody joining a Toastmasters club is based on their emotion. They're not, it's not a logical decision. They get in there, they like it, they feel good, they want to stay. As a club executive, the retention is also the same way. If we can make a member feel good about themselves in a club, they'll stick around, right? You see how these things are continuous. So if you figured out your client avatar, you put the right messaging in front of those people and made the right emotional connections, they'll not only come in, but since you've done your work and your marketing message is in alignment with what the club is about, they'll stick around because that's continuity, right? It's not this sort of separate message of, yeah, I brought you. It's not bait and switch, right? You brought him in because of something, that promise that was made. That promise is being delivered, and you keep going that way, right? So so we talked about what they look at, we talked about what they listen to, we talked about what they're sort of visualizing, the imagery that's in front of them, what are they listening to in terms of their thoughts, and then we came down to emotions, right? So then you can start to ask some questions, right? You can ask some questions of what are the biggest, once you've done this, right? So this, doing this, when you sit down and in order to create that realistic avatar, there aren't like specific techniques. I'm telling you the techniques right now, right? So as you go through, you're building this. Initially, when you start a project, your this client avatar document might be one page, right? You just have like one page that answers some questions. And a lot of that might even be guesswork because you just don't know, right? You're guessing that this is the type of thing that you're doing. But as I said, as you move forward, regardless of what you're doing, what you're marketing, that information gets more mature, right? You keep working with it and it gets better and better as it goes up, as it gets more developed, right? So I have client avatar documents that are 20, 30 pages long, right? And it's like this ongoing research that you do. And I think each one of these is a retirement plan, because regardless of what the industry is, you if you have that nailed down, you can leave a business entirely and go into another business that serves the same person, and you'll immediately start making money because the foundation is in place, right? You have it. That to me is the gold mine that you have once you've kind of discovered that, and you went through. It's not easy, it takes time, it takes money, because that marketing is not free, right? You keep sending that message out regardless of what it is, right? So let's come back to these questions. What are the biggest challenges that your client avatar faces? Okay, and when you go through and you do this, you will know their biggest challenges. Again, do you know them? Know them? No. But you have a pretty accurate guess of what it is. You can continue that. What are their biggest challenges when they're faced with blank? And that blank is multiple different things, right? It could be, what are they? Let's talk about Toastmasters. What are the biggest challenges when they face when they're asked to speak right now without any preparations? The solution we have for that is obviously table topics. But what are the challenges they face? I've had students that when we do that with, and I don't mean like college students, like students that they start laughing hysterically, right? And there's like it's just how they channel their nervous energy. I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of this, the different types of this. People burst into tears for no reason. You know, we had this person at ITD 2 years ago. Maybe Mariam remembers her. I don't know. She just, if we talked about her, she would physically get sick. Like she would turn red and then she'd have to remove herself and start crying or doing whatever she was. So the answer to that question is different for each person. And when you're doing your client avatar, you're writing it for a specific person. Remember that. Okay, that's what we're doing. We're answering that question for a unique person, and then you can change the blank for something else. So what are her biggest challenges when she's asked to give a presentation in front of a room? That's a different answer. What are her biggest challenges when she's asked to lead a group in a project? Now we've crossed over from the public speaking into the leadership component of Toastmasters, right? So what when we answer these questions, don't be shy with your answer. Write. You know, allow yourself to write about this. Allow your pen, your keyboard, however you're doing this, to just go without, I don't know, depending on how much experience you have with writing. One of the suggestions is don't edit constantly as you're doing it. Don't keep hitting that backspace. Just type away, right? And then you'll come back and edit when at a different time, right? So you continue to write about this. Now, next question. What are they trying to achieve? Right? Now you could make that more specific in different fields. You could say, what are they trying to achieve in there? And then add something as the blank. Because each one of us as a person has various um, aspects to our lives, right? We have a professional aspect, we have a personal life, sort of love life aspect. We have, as parents, we have that aspect. There's personal development aspect. There are a lot of different aspects, right? So you could ask, what are they trying to achieve in their career, for example? What are they trying to achieve as a parent? That's how you fill that blank. And then there are answers that you can obviously give for that. Now, the next step is, let's say they are looking at the product, right? Let's say they're coming in and they're signing up as a guest for our club in Toastmasters. Why are they doing this? That's the next question. Why are they doing it? There's an answer that goes in there, right? What is their motivation? So why are they doing it is different from what is their motivation. Why are they doing it is looking at the reasoning behind it. What is their motivation is more an emotional sort of connection. And you base these questions on various fields, not just a specific field. You base them on different, as I said, the blanks are the different fields that you focus on. And so we talked about, why are they doing it? That's the reasoning behind it. What is their motivation is sort of more aimed at their emotional level. What is it that motivates them when they're doing this? And lastly, in this sort of chain of questions, what are they inspired by? Right, that inspiration is sort of the upper limit of emotions. It transcends emotion into, if you want to call it, a spiritual sort of realm, right? So it's no longer, you're talking about service, for example, doing good for their kind. It's different than the emotional level that we just talked about. And then the last question I would ask, and this is sort of the thing that is a conclusion of everything you've done. All the work that you've done comes down to, what is the end in mind for them? What's the end in mind for them? The end in mind is very, very important, right? For all of us, we should know what the end in mind is. We never get into our car and start driving not knowing where we're going to go. We need to know where we're going, right? That the map and how to get there is a secondary question. The primary question is to know where we are going, and that's the end in mind. So what is the end in mind for your client avatar that you're creating? What is the end in mind for this person? So I'm being asked for an example of end in mind, right? So let's talk about, let's say somebody is uh, let's talk about Toastmasters. Okay, let's take an example of someone that joins Toastmasters. Let's talk about someone who has a has a deep experience with a challenge in their life, and they want to share this with people, and they just don't have the tools to do that, right? So somebody who's overcome a huge challenge in their life, as a result of that, they have enhanced their life, and now they're inspired by, remember how, what are they inspired by? They're inspired by changing lives, right? So because those are the last two questions, right? They're inspired by changing lives, and you can see how that's more of a, again, a spiritual, if you want. I don't like calling it a spiritual, because my definition of spiritual is very different than this, but it's sort of above that layer of being selfish and what's in it for me type of thing, right? So they they are inspired by changing other people's lives, right? If we look at that, the end in mind for this person could be they are recognized as a leader in the community, for example. And as a result of that, they have the ability to change many lives every single year, for example. Or every single speech they give, they have 100,000 people that are watching the speech. And as a result of that, they're changing 100,000 lives, or a certain percentage of that. Obviously, you don't do that with everybody in front of you, right? So that's kind of the end in mind. It's that goal at the end that just kind of that pushes us to move forward with that. So that, in a nutshell, right? I mean, I don't know how long I've spoken for about 30 minutes right now, I think. It's a nutshell. That, in a nutshell, is what a client avatar is. But let me tell you how to use it a little bit as we do this, because again, like I said, imagine this was the first session of these workshop sessions, right? So you have built this client avatar. Now you want to go work on your website, for example, right? You keep all of this in mind. You read through it. You're building the website for one person now. It's not you're not building this website in a not knowing who you're making this for and what's happening. You're building this website specifically for this client avatar. This is a person, remember, you can see. I have had clients that have actually gone online and typed in brunette woman 25 da, 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 found a picture, downloaded a random picture, and that's their client avatar. Like, you have to have this person be that realistic for you for it to work. So every single time, I think next session, if I'm not mistaken, is email marketing. If it is, when you're sitting down and writing emails to someone, you no longer are writing it to a group of people. You're writing the emails to one person. And guess what happens on, I am sure, I am 100% sure you've been on the receiving end of an email like that. When you read that email, you feel like you're sitting in your bedroom alone and somebody's speaking just to you. And you sit there and go, wow, how did he know that? Because they're in our thoughts. You're in their thoughts. You're in their, you understand them at times better than they understand themselves. Because most people do not take the time to do this kind of self-analysis, right? They're not aware of what they're thinking. They're not aware of what their emotions are, but you're doing the work, and you've come across 10, 20, 50, 100, hundreds of people that have these issues, these things that we talked about in common. So when you speak to them, you're speaking to them very intelligently. You're an expert in those issues. They're not. They just know their version of themselves, or their version of what that client avatar is, with probably very limited study, right? So whether you're writing an email series, you're creating videos, you're creating social media content, if you do it based on your client avatar, they're captivated. They respond to it. The questions that arise from that are exactly the questions that the answers to those questions are things that go back into your client avatar, right? So if you're in communication with your audience, they ask you questions, you realize based on those questions, you realize what it is that they are asking about. Now let's take this a little bit further. People who have done this properly for many, many years, they have such strong bond with their clients that they define their next product based on what their clients want, rather than sitting there and thinking, okay, this is what's the next thing that I'm going to do, right? If they have, there's an article, I think the guy's name is Kevin Kelly, if I'm not mistaken. It's called 1000 True Fans. If you guys have not read that, please go read this. It will change your life. 1000 True Fans. As if you are interested in the field of marketing, it will change your life. It will change your sort of marketing life, if you will. And I don't want to ruin it. Go read it because he's written it so well. I don't want to ruin it by telling you what it is. But basically, if you have built this, and based on this you build an audience around it, that audience is very loyal to you because you understand them, you speak their language, you speak their language, not your language. You speak their language, you speak to their needs, you speak to their aspirations, you speak to their challenges. Therefore, the products that you launch as well will be those that solve their problems. Sometimes you can even anticipate what problems might be coming up in their lives. Because remember, you've met them. So let's say this particular person that were not your client avatar, this particular person that's sitting there reading your emails, let's say they're in their 20s. You've already met that person in their 30s because you have somebody like that on your email list that's been corresponding with you, and you know what that challenge results in 10 years from now if nothing has been done about it, right? If Let me give you a tangible example. If your product deals with diabetes, for example, right? You know someone who's at the onset of diabetes, what they feel like. You also know what they feel like when they're 10 years into this, if they haven't really dealt with it, for example, right? So because of that, you can anticipate the challenges that are coming up for them. And if you can anticipate it and you're telling them about it, you seem like a magician, don't you? You seem like a fortune teller of some sort because the things you said come true, right? As they go through their life. So I'm telling you all of this to kind of sell you on the idea to sit down, take the time and do this, because it's much easier to kind of get yourself into this gear of producing content without having this information and study than to sit down and do the work. There's work that you have to do to get this done, and it's ongoing. As I said, this is important. Please don't think you do this once and then you're done. So every single step, everything I've talked to you about up until now, and I will talk to you about as we do the next sessions, please remember, I've told you about client avatar. I've told you about the importance of it. So I'm assuming you're basing it on that. Anybody can make an Instagram post. Anybody can create a video. You can go hire people, copywriters, to write an article a day for you. Anyone can do this stuff. But will it work? And whether or not it works comes down to this. At least that's my opinion. That's my sort of experienced expert opinion. It comes back to this. This to me is the secret sauce. This is the thing that either makes everything work or it doesn't. Now, let me talk about Toastmasters for a minute because I've been thinking about, some of you know I just took an area director role a little while ago. And this kind of took me into thinking about this more than I had before. I think as club coaches, as people who look at clubs and the success of the clubs, because 9 out of 10 times, the people who come into these clubs and they're trying to lead the clubs, they don't have any experience, right? They just dive in and they try to do the best they can. But we as leaders that have been around for a long time doing this, we have an insight that they necessarily don't have, right? And I think we need to get in there and we need to, the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out who is this club? What is their fabric? What's unique about them? Who would be a good fit for the club, right? There's a different relationship as well in there that we didn't talk about when we're talking about the client avatar, right? Not everybody's a good fit for every club, right? If you throw me into a mix of a club that has, 5 6 people of a certain caliber, I probably ruin their coherence. It's just, I come in and they go, oh, okay, we can't have the small talk we used to, for example, because this guy doesn't laugh at our jokes. Right, for example. So there's that you can't just say, oh, let's just go invite guests and we'll get this club up to 20 people and we're good to go. I think that's the wrong approach. It's like a band-aid, right? They did the renewals and then here we go, right? I think that the more difficult approach, but possibly the better approach, is for our coaches to go in there and look at who they are. What is that community? What's unique about that community? Who can we bring into this club that would assure their success? What does a good CEO do? Any good leader, forget about a CEO, any good leader looks at the team and figures out who's good for what, right? Who's good for this role, and you give them that role and they feel fantastic in it, and the community grows as a result, right? So I think when we look at Toastmasters and if we want to improve our clubs, what I am working on in my mind is you go in, you look at who are these people, why are they together, what is their goal, what is their challenge, right? So then help the club executive come up with this client avatar. Okay, call it the guest avatar, whatever, right? Who is the perfect guest? And then start to build our messaging for that club, our open houses. Everything we do is based on that. Then we don't have to really think about what should an open house for this club ABC look like. Well, it should look like the thing that attracts that particular guest that we just wrote about, right? Is if that guest is interested in understanding how to set goals, then we should do an open house that has a keynote speech about how to set goals. And when we put this message in front of them, they're not only not going to resist to come to the open house, they're going to be counting minutes, days to come into that open house, right? And then because we've done our work, because of the consistency that exists inside the club, that club is going to see retention, right? That's my guess. And everything we do is around that same thing. So when it's a difficult conversation to have inside a club executive that's new to everything, this isn't something that they can do on their own. I don't see how a club executive can do this on their own unless they have people in there that have been trained or have had exposure to this previously in their previous life, right? So I think, as from a district perspective, from a even VPPR perspective, if you're VPPRs, we can reach out to the district and say, could you help me figure out who the perfect guest is for my club, right? And we do a mastermind and figure that out. Okay, I think I'm done as far as content. I would love for you guys to unmute yourselves, give me some idea. There's a bunch of questions that we can go over. and tell me what you think in general. Tell me, let's have a conversation around this.
Hey, Jamak, Jaya here.
Yes.
No, so I really enjoyed this session, and it really resonates with the type of work I do regularly as well. Because regardless of what domain you're in, building these client avatars or building these personas comes in very crucial. So, what is an attributes library that you could have handy or refer to? And it reminded me of role-playing games, like Dungeons and Dragons or whatever
Yeah.
else, where, you have these books which tell you, like, there is this character who has these particular attributes, has these motivation. So, and I was looking on Amazon, I'm like, okay, there's actually a book that, role-playing character builder guide, which I think I'm going to get next because your conversation reminded me of that, saying, hey, I need an attribute library. The other thing that I've done is perform interviews, do surveys, and also shadowing, so I can understand my client's persona a bit better and have that documented. The approach, it helps you identify not just your client, but it also helps you identify who are possibly not your clients.
The thing you said at the very end is something I forgot to mention. That is very important because, by eliminating who is not your client, you save so much time and money. It's unbelievable. So thank you so much, Jaya, for bringing that up.
So in software development, we make multiple user personas for the product that we have. They'd be different kinds. So here you're talking about that 10% commonality between them. Would you build multiple characters?
Depends on what I'm doing, right? Depends on what I'm working on. Yes, the answer the general answer is yes, but specifically it would depend on what the project is and what I'm doing. And let me give you a more specific answer. I was working with someone who has a podcast, right? So the message that they put out and their podcast sort of organically got to where it is today. They have a lot of downloads. When we had this conversation, his response was, well, I can't do that. I have three different types of people because I have so his podcast is sort of from the heart and it's about who he is, right? So he obviously our personalities, as I just said, we have various aspects, right? So in his podcast, he has episodes that have to do with how to be a good parent, that have to do with how to make your body better, for performance, and have to do with working on your mind, right? So with the way he does it is he rotates his episodes now, right? So he releases one episode per audience group per month. And he knows that, and he's actually, the funny thing is, he's actually communicated that to his audience. He's told them. He's told them every episode that I release, there's a 30% chance that you like it. And we all know he knows that he's right. And his stats show that as well, right? So when you go through and you do this properly, you give it enough time. And Janice, you'd remember this particularly. We had a conversation about this earlier in the year about how if we continue this sort of online marketing advertising approach within the district, at least we'll have numbers to tell the story, right? Because if you do this long enough, your statistics will tell you that these type of people are more attracted to your messaging, or this group of people is more attracted to this particular messaging. So if you talked about a certain thing, if you talked about leadership, for example, and you have this many people getting fired up and responding and getting engaged, versus when you talk about public speaking, you get a different group of people. So yes, that could be two very different groups of people,
Okay.
but you may not know that off the bat, right? You may or may not, depending on your project. But even if that was the case, though, everything I said still applies, because now you have two laser pointers at two different groups of people, not a shotgun approach again.
Right. So for Toastmasters, my initial assumption breakdown would be those people interested in leadership, those who are just want to get two words out of their mouth, and those who want to polish and become like professional presenters.
Yeah, and possibly there is one other group of people who are just lonely and they want to be a part of a community,
Yeah.
which is completely okay, right? That
Yep.
especially today, I think that's probably a lot of people could use that. I don't know if we do a good enough job of showcasing ourselves as that, right? As being a community, fun, entertaining, come sit around with us. It's like we used to go at this time of the year, especially, we used to go sit around a fire and have eggnog and talk and whatever. That doesn't happen, right? And for someone whose family lives in Nova Scotia, having a group of people that embraces them as a friend on a weekly basis is really
Yeah.
valuable, right? So,
Yeah.
that could be another group.
Yep.
But I
Okay.
think, see that I think each club would probably be more attractive to one of those groups or a combination of maybe two and not four, right?
Yeah.
So a club that has, out of 1 hour, they have 45 minutes of table topics, for example, would be good for the group that just want to get a few words out, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the club that has 4 speaking slots and 5 minutes of table topics would be good for a different group of people, right? So that's what I mean when I said
Yeah.
study the fiber of the club.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Any other question? I'm cheering you up. Just go ahead. Alan, do you have any question?
Yes, my question is from Jamak. What I was wondering is when you say about the end game and aim that they have, how we can find that one? Because going back to the same question that was the previous question, I totally agree that people come for different reasons. And I have seen even in our club, and partly even can contribute it and even back to myself. There are many people and members that I have noticed that are not particularly coming to be a public speaker.
Right.
They're coming to contribute somehow and find friends and be a part of something.
Hmm.
And how can we recognize that so we can um, promote that one and just keep them? Or how
Okay.
can we recognize that?
Yeah. So would you be willing to play with me, participate, and we'll do a little activity and I'll answer your question through the activity. Would
Yeah, I
that
just
work?
want to know how we can recognize
Yeah.
that. I just want to see
Yeah.
how,
So
yeah.
so my answer is you ask them. But I want to elaborate on that. And if you're willing to participate, I can ask you a bunch of questions and we can get to what the end in mind for you is for joining Toastmasters. Do you want to do that?
Sure,
Okay.
it can be a practice.
Yeah. Well, let's do it. Okay. So which club are you a part of?
1085, no short first semester.
Okay. And how long ago did you join the club, Alan?
It's about 4 years.
4 years ago. So, Alan, when you were 4 years ago, when you were looking at various clubs, what exactly was it that you looked for? Did you type into search Toastmasters? Was it a friend that brought you? How did this happen?
Well, not, it was the closest to my residence. That was
Okay.
the main reason.
Yeah, but you knew you wanted to get into Toastmasters?
Yes.
Okay. Why?
The main reason that it started was I mean I was new and I was told that it would help you in public speaking, but
Mm-hmm.
when I joined, that was not the main reason that
Mm-hmm.
made me to.
That got you
My
to
reason,
stay.
yes, not to stay,
Yeah.
because my um, nature of job is being behind computer, and I'm not having that type of communications or interactions
Mm-hmm.
directly with
Mm-hmm.
any
Mm-hmm.
clients. The main reason that made me stay was I noticed that the impact that I may have and others and the interactions with the others and the
Mm-hmm.
relations that we could make with the other members.
Beautiful. That's
And I have noticed that it happens to many others. So that's one of the main reasons for myself that I
that's why
think
you stayed, right? So,
exactly.
but let me take you back again to 4 years ago when you joined and you were looking for Toastmasters, and you found the club that's near your place of residence. Why were you thinking about public speaking at that point in time?
At that point of time, I was thinking because basically I have never been even into my educations and everything. Whenever I was having any project that I was delivering, I would rather to do the projects and give it to the other classmate to deliver it.
To present.
Yeah,
Okay.
to present, right?
Mm-hmm,
That was the
mm-hmm,
type of myself I would always be and not in a spotlight.
mm-hmm.
And I noticed that somehow it's necessary to be at least the minor, there's something to do that, something to do about it. So that was the main reason I noticed that I have to do something about it.
Right. Okay, Alan, with your permission, I want to ask you a question that's a little bit more personal. You don't have to answer it. So my question is, when you just described throughout school and work not being able to present your project and handing it over to your classmates or other team members, how did that make you feel?
Oh, not comfortable, definitely.
Hmm. When you say not comfortable, is it fear? Were you afraid, and did that make you not feel good enough? Or can you explain that a little bit?
Well, I was, yes, I wouldn't feel um, not comfortable to present something, and I not feel even comfortable to be in this center of attention. So
Mm-hmm.
I would prefer to do the jobs and give someone else to hand it to present it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need it even necessary, to be honest.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's pause it here. We can continue, but let's pause it and let me narrate on this a little bit. Okay. So this probably took us maybe 10 minutes, 7, 8 minutes to go through this. I could go on with this for another hour,
Yeah.
right? We can continue digging, right? And it's now at some point that role turns into a therapist, right? Because you start to touch on points that's very vulnerable and you have to be very careful, and not everybody can do it. That I stopped it here because I want it to be I want people to be able to duplicate this, right? I don't want to get to a place where someone goes, oh, I'm uncomfortable asking that question, right? So we focused on why Alan joined Toastmasters. Now, the longevity in Toastmasters is also another thing we can study, which would be related to a VP membership role and what programs we have, maybe VP education, like that. Those are the kind of things, right? But if we want to focus on the VPPR segment of this, right, the messaging that somebody like Ellen would look at and go, okay, that's exactly what I want to do. You can see he's an engineer, but I'm sorry, I'm assuming you're an engineer, right? He's an engineer type, right? So he's behind the computer most of the time. I'm getting into this client avatar, right? So I would be writing, Alan spends 80% of his workday behind the computer. He's looking at code as he's doing this. So this is as we're developing this, right? So I haven't forgotten the question he asked me. The question was, what's the end in mind and how can we discover that, right? So as we put this together, we know that Alan's thought process is probably, as the project is coming together, and he's even maybe putting the actual PowerPoint presentation together himself because he's a detailed oriented person. He's probably going, well, I'm not going to be talking about this. It's going to be Joe that's going to be talking about this. So he's presenting already. You can probably feel, even as I say this, I can get some of the sensations and feelings in my body that I am producing this, handing it over to somebody else to reap the rewards of my work to some extent, because we all want that attention. When we say, I don't want to be the center of the attention, that's an internal conflict that we have, because we want to be the center of attention. Since we were born, we all want to be the center of attention. We when psychologically there's something in us that says, no, 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 I don't want to be in the spotlight. That's a um, what do you call it? That's an internal struggle that happens between these two things, right? We all like being rewarded. We all like to be called upon to do things. That's why we put our hands up and we speak. I am an introvert. I'm an extreme introvert. So I face this myself, right? But there's nothing I can see the smile and the joy that comes to me when I'm recognized, right? So all of that is there. So those things are the emotional connections that we can make with this individual, and the end in mind. If we stop there, if we don't dig in anymore, the end in mind is for Alan to be excited about presenting this himself, for Alan to be the person who's called upon to present the projects, right? For Alan to be in that center of attention spot. And now this one is a little bit tricky, right? To be in the center of attention spot, but that feeling of humility and um, not wanting to be the center of attention is still there. Does that make sense? He's still getting the rewards. He's getting that feeling of being recognized, but he's not necessarily being, oh yeah, I'm the king, right? That's the thing he hates. He does. That's when we say I don't want to be the center of attention. That's the part of it. So I don't know, I might be just, not all of this might be correct. I'm just sort of flowing as I'm working on this issue with you, right? But the end in mind, either they know it and they'll tell you specifically what it is because they've thought about it, or the end in mind is something you dig out and you kind of guess, right? So it's important. I think it's important for every VP membership and eventually every VP education to sit down with a member and say, hey, what do you want? Why are you here? How can we help you succeed, right? And that goes back to that client avatar that we talked about, and keep building on that, right? So now, one thing that you brought up, and it's very interesting, is the end in mind changed for Alan, right? Alan's end in mind was presentation skills, but his end in mind changed once he was introduced to the program because he started to see the possibilities, right? And isn't that the case a lot of times for many of us, right? We set a goal, we get to the goal, and the goal becomes a venue and a way to get to the next goal, right? So that becomes nourishing the member and going from there.
Okay, that part of handing the work to somebody belongs exactly to what I was explained to be a dichotomy of emotions. Yes, you want to be gratified, but you don't want to be at at the front end of the viewing of the audience. And I'm going to tell you, how do I know? When I was a little human being, I was added to be in a ballet class, and we will do presentations in a theater. And I will walk to the back, even though I would be the first ballerina for the presentation in the theater. But I didn't want to be the center of attention. And then you would see everybody pushing me to the front. Now you are the first one, you had to be at the front. Years later, I realized that that was the fear of being the only one to receive the award or the clapping or everything, because I didn't feel I was worthy of it. When that detail was explained to me, the person that explained that to me, said that that's a dichotomy of emotions. So when we have the personality, we are introvert and we are put up to the front, then we get into that fear, and then we push somebody else to the front and let him receive the award, or let's move him to the front. But that is what you're doing with that. And with that process, and specifically in the arts, I mean, and that we come now with the singing, I would not mind to be in the choir, but don't take me as a soloist. Until, okay, there was a choir director that says, you are going to be, you don't tell a no to me. You are the voice for this. And that day I said, okay, this is creepy. I have to be the soloist. And I went to the front, and he encouraged me. He gave me thousands of suggestions, and I could be a soloist. So, but it is as well who is guiding you to be there. In the case now, let me place now in the case of Toastmasters, who is the mentor? How the mentor can recognize that you are one of those people that want to be on the back end or the medium end, but not necessarily in on the front. That you could do the presentation, but you don't want to be recognized at the front, or you don't mind to be going to a speech contest because you think you're not worthy of it. So how a mentor can lead with that. And this in particular is something that apparently is one of the reasons that why we lose members along the way, is people are afraid to be at the front, but they cannot recognize in themselves the value that they have in what they are giving away or the speech. And sometimes I have seen people with an amazing quality of a speech, and then suddenly they drop out, but they drop out because of specifically that. So now going to the marketing place, how you catch in people so good that they can recognize that they can stay and move ahead. That's the question. Now that I gave all that spiel.
Well, I mean, I don't know if that's a marketing question. Once the person is there, that's no longer necessarily a marketing question, right? If they're there in the club and then trying to figure out what their comfort zone is, what is the reach, how far out of the comfort zone we can take them without breaking them, basically. That becomes, like you said, a mentorship question slash, in terms of club roles, it's probably VP education and VP membership, trying to figure out what role is the right role. How many times should person be a timer before they're an all counter, for example? That kind of balance of, okay, yeah, they're afraid. We know they're afraid. They've expressed it, or in some other way, we know that they're fearful, and we put means into place of doing that. With that girl that I gave you an example for, we gave her a pass. We said, just come sit here, just show up. All you have to do is show up. Nobody's going to call on you. Nobody's going to bring up your name. Just show up. And she did. She did. She just sat there. She just sat there and smiled and was enjoying herself. And I think for her, that was an improvement in itself. So it's dependent on the person. And I don't know if that necessarily has anything to do with the client avatar, but that's, this is sort of where the topic is right now. And it is important to know the person that we're dealing with, and where they are in their life. I know Ray has a question, but I have a question written in chat. Yuri, can I answer that? Jaya's question. No, no problem. So Jaya, I think what you mean, and please feel free to unmute yourself and explain. But I think what you mean is, how do we know that it's failed? Am I right in that?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So I think first of all, I wouldn't call it failure, because in every case, whatever we do, we're getting more information, and that's a success in itself. But failed in terms of it didn't work, in terms of we need to try something else, in terms of refinement of client avatar. That through the numbers, right? That through, for example, if I put an ad up that's based on the client avatar that I created, and my click-throughs are very low, I know something went wrong. And through testing, if I want to look at the analytical aspect of it, through testing, I can tell that this isn't working. Something is wrong here, and I keep trying different things until I get an answer. If you this is to do with digital marketing as a whole, right? So people not engaging with content, right? So I put the content out there. Let's use this example right here where we're at. I put the content out here, and none of you guys, even in here, none of you guys are. Let's say, for example, that I had a pitch at the end of this, and I wanted to get you to come and take a class with me for whatever, $200, right? And I can see that you're not engaged, you don't care, it just doesn't make any sense. I know that that's wrong, right? My assumption that this would be an interesting subject, my assumption that this would help you grow, was wrong. So the short answer is through the numbers, through the engagement, through the response that I get from the audience. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. And there's a second part which you could possibly comment on, which is
Mhm.
what have your experiences been in seeing it fail? Like, has it impacted reputation, or had to go back to the drawing board on a product, or uh, just curious in that regard?
Yeah, so I can give you a lot of examples because this happens all the time. This isn't a unique situation. I don't think I've ever had anything just completely bomb, well, where we've had to start from scratch, because some of the assumptions that we make usually are educated guesses. They're not, they're not completely um, random, if you will. But I've had situations where the extreme situation that I remember was this company that I through the stuff I did, they realized that an entire product line was useless. So they had an entire product line that nobody was buying, and they were thinking, "Oh, we're not advertising it. We're not doing this. We're not doing that," and it took something like, I want to say $10,000 in Google AdWords budget for me to prove to the owner that people just don't want this product, you know. And he ended up at the end saving money, but that was a costly venture for the guy, right? He had the entire product line out, he was producing, he was storing these things, and we spent, some money on the funnel and, getting the ads out and stuff like that. But it proved to him that it didn't work. The more common thing that happens is assumptions that we make about, for example, what is an aspiration for somebody? What are they inspired by? We put that out there and they don't respond to it. And then we have to go to something else. So it's like, I always use this example of when a plane takes off from the origin to the destination, the pilot always makes minor course adjustments. And this is the same thing that we do. We make minor course adjustments based on the failures. I'll give you another example. I think about 8, 9 years ago, I started working with someone who wanted to do a cooking show, and we started this from scratch. It was Persian cooking, Iranian cuisine, and he was teaching how to do this. And all the videos that were there, that we were seeing, were like short little, whatever, 30 to 2 minute videos of how to cook something, like recipe stuff. And I told this guy, listen, people are interested in hearing the story that you tell while you're cooking. Otherwise, they would just go look up a recipe. This isn't why they're here, because he was organically getting some engagement. And two assumptions that were made were wrong. And we proved this with, again, numbers and engagement. And we had to do a course adjustment. One was, he thought that it was male between 25 to 35, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that were attracted to his message. Turned out to be females in their 50s, 45, 50 years old was the majority. So different, right? So obviously the messaging and everything turned out to be completely different. And then the other thing was the length of the videos, right? He thought these short videos were the thing, but the comments we were getting was like, "Oh, what happened to your story this time?" Like we were really looking forward to know what happened with so and so, but he had cut it short. He had gone from telling this amazing story to, you mix 1 cup of this with a pinch of that, and a splash of whatever, and people were just not interested in it anymore. So that was a failure, if we want to look at it that way, and we went back and readjusted the client's avatar, and then we got back on track, and then it continued to get better, because now we knew that that's the exact demographic that was interested in it. I think Ray has a question, if I'm not mistaken.
So when you have your base client avatar, which is the people that are interested in that you think are interested in your product, would you design or have a template of that avatar that you could then pass on to the next level, be the VP of membership, or would you have another version of that, or could you design another version of that you would pass on to VP of membership and the VP of education in a Toastmasters club context to say, okay, this person is basically like this, and then they can then use that avatar to refine it in greater detail, just in terms of mentorship or membership management within a Toastmasters club. So that's my question. Was it clear?
Yeah, I got it. I got it. I think I think that's a great question. I think that's a great point actually. I don't look at it as a question. I think that continuity is key. I don't think the quote unquote marketer, the VPPR should be the only one working on that avatar. We talked about the experience, the member experience, and what that club is all about. What is unique about this club. So I think everybody should be involved in that. I think everybody should collaborate on that, because once we establish a club, like so let's look at a new club, right? So if you have a new club and you're marketing and you get a group of people, 20 people together, and you charter, you slowly see that club start to kind of refine itself and have a culture around it, and have a direction around it, and have, for the lack of a better term, a mission statement, a vision statement, like there's something there that says this is who we are, right? And that should reflect back into the client avatar, not necessarily in the perspective of who is this for, but from the perspective of who do we want in this club, because that's who we want to attract. It's our family, right? So it's whatever. If they the guy that if we want to have a club that's thriving, and we want to be comfortable around each other, we want to work towards that, then we want to attract the right people to our club. So the answer to your question is, I think that's absolutely true. I don't think necessarily it should be a version of it. I think it should be the document. It should be like a Google Doc or something that everybody has access to. They can read and they can make suggestions on it. They can make comments on it. It's a working document. The VP membership has a conversation with a member, they'll come back and reflect it in there. The VP the education has a conversation with a member, they come back and reflect it in there. So yes, absolutely. Janice, yes.
Okay, I just had this strange image go through my mind as you're talking of having somebody impersonate your club avatar and join your meeting.
Yeah. That's true. That could happen. They must have a lot of time on their hand, but it could
Yeah.
happen.
Okay. As I've been talking, my avatar that I'm taking note or not taking notes during her talk, her name is Abby.
Nice.
So I've been writing about Abby as I've been taking notes.
It's great to meet Abby. I'd love to see her picture and everything else. Hey, I had one guy, not a client. This was someone I knew through courses and whatnot that we've gone to. He created a Twitter account for his avatar. He was tweeting as the avatar. This was very, very real, so go for it. All the power to you.
I have another question
Sure.
very quickly. I posted the statistics from Toastmasters International in chat, and they had published standard Toastmasters avatars at one point. I can't
Nice.
think of
Wow.
them right now, but they had like 4 or 5 characters with names and characteristics. If you have that starting profile, would you use it for a club or would you start from scratch?
No, if they have something built, I'd use it and start testing against that, make it my own, right? Make it, because if anytime you have a starting point, why not, right? Unless, I mean, if it's done properly, I don't know what you're talking about, right? I'd have to look at it, but if it's done properly, why not? Even if it's again, I think every club is unique in its own, but the fact that Toastmasters is a public speaking, leadership, communication, educational institution, obviously some of the things are common, right? So that would be an interesting starting point to start with, and then build on it.
Okay.
That is what I call the the culture of the club, the
Mhm,
inner
yes,
culture of the club.
absolutely. Yeah.
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 So, is there any question, please? Miriam, are you going to ask
Thank
any
you.
question? Are you have any doubts there?
No, not for now. I'm just enjoying this session. That was great. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's always good to have you here.
Yeah. So officially, we have reached the end. I didn't want to use the lights today,
Thank you.
but
They're distracting.
I don't know if it's distracting, but I would get distracted for sure. But anyhow, thank you so much, Mac. I mean, you have done an amazing job up to now. I
My
know
pleasure.
this is going to go on in January, is the email one that you had, and I already forgot the
It's
name of
okay.
it and
Let me,
everything.
yeah, it's email marketing. Can I talk about that
Yes,
for just a
please.
couple minutes? That session, if you guys want to think about it, if you really want to get the most out of that session, do your client avatar work between now and then, because that's something I personally spent a lot of money on learning. I'm not a writer, but I aspire to be a writer. I like writing. I just never have put enough time into it to see the results. But I've seen this work for me, who is not a writer. I'm not a copywriter by any stretch of imagination. But the methodology I've learned is really helpful, and it's really, really fun to do. So, we're going to talk about how to write an email sequence. So we've talked about funnels in the past. We've talked about having capture pages. We've talked about how to put get people to opt into our list. Basically, what we're going to talk about is how to what happens once the person opts in. What happens from that point when they're going to start getting emails. They're going to receive emails in a sequence as they move forward. How do we go from that point zero to the point of sale? Or as far as Toastmasters is concerned, from that point to them becoming a member, right? And I think it's wonderful. I mean, I know for a fact that you guys will enjoy it. So there's a little about that. Maybe Ray, when he's editing, can take that as a little promo video for the next session. You're muted, Yuri.
Just was giggling first. Sorry. It's just yeah, it's amazing, and I mean, I'm really pleased. I mean, I hope you have fantastic holidays. I don't know what you celebrate, but that is okay. It is not a time for business. It is a time to be with the family. That's
Yes.
the way I see it. I don't do it the same way as everybody does it. I don't care about the day. It's a date I want or I have time for. But anyway, I wish you all the best time. I hope to see all of you back in January when we have the session with Jamak again. Next week we have uh, I should have that one in my brain already ingrained. We have the crisis is Helen He from Wuhan, and she has an amazing suggestion in how to deal with all what we are having and living in. So I suggest you to come see her. I mean, she's an amazing person. That is the reference that we have. So I have no doubts. Um, come and see her next week. It's not a regular time, by the way. Just keep that in mind. Like, I don't want somebody forgetting, like somebody did today. But keep it in mind that it is very important to have it at the right time. To be exact, is on the 12th, I think it's at 4 o'clock our time. It's on Saturday. Yeah, on the 12th at 4. Yeah. And the name of it is Change by the Crisis. With that, if anyone wants to hang out and stay a little bit longer, you could. And thank you
Yuri, do
so
you have the
much
date and time for the next one, for my next one? Jaya is
for
asking.
Jaja is asking. It would
Mhm.
be January 9th, email marketing at 2 o'clock. That one is at 2 again. I'm sorry, but hey.
That's all right.
So anyone, on January 3rd, we have Gillian Roberts doing goal setting. That is nice for the beginning of the year, by the way. And I really mean it, especially us that we tend to do the goal settings for the year. Uh, that is one. I will be doing again the leadership and empathy on January 10th. And then Mimi would be doing once again the Toastmasters 101 for new members tour. And then it will be Dorothea doing the speaker to trainer part one on January 24th. And January 31st would be Dorothea again, part two of the same speaker to trainer. So we're going to be off from December 12th to January 3rd. Just hope to see you all back again and more people, of course. So bye-bye. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a good time. Thank you,
Thanks,
Jamak.
everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Good
Thanks
rest of the
again.
weekend. Bye.
Thank
You have tuned into and are viewing the District 96 Toastmasters website. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel.